Hello, my faithful students, and welcome to YouTube Masterclass. That's YouTube Masterclass. It's the YouTube version of Masterclass. It's pretty powerful. There's quite a few of us in it. It is a real masterclass. Strangely enough, we're teaching a real class through COURSERA. You can get credits through USC, CALARTS, and or Harvard, and I'm telling you, it's worth taking. This is the second semester coming to an end. It seems the first semester is somewhat truncated from its original form, and I'll tell you, if you watch all the videos associated with semester 1 that aren't associated with semester 2, you're logging plenty of time if you count an hour for the final. The final, again, this time is the first semester was name your favorite film and discuss and defend why it's your favorite by describing its formal considerations. And we had many good examples of papers. My favorite being the one about Bambi and about how it had growths of movements of life segmented off throughout its metaphoric frame. And I thought that was a brilliant paper that was on Bambi. I thought it was going to be on the density of the backgrounds that were so hard to reproduce, but it was the formal considerations where the character arc in the narrative, where the characters are becoming from birth to childhood to adulthood in every segment, performing the situation of their natural abilities in all those forms, and that what it's like to grow to the rites of passage level with Bambi and be part of that character arc has just been the surprise reason that movie is really so aesthetically wonderful. And so that was a writing element, that was a screen time element, the way they defined the seasons by different times. And I love papers like that about formal considerations. Think about that. And it could have just been a paper about how they photographed backgrounds behind each other in a big studio to make the depth look like it was all on a real forest level. And all these techniques are special effects and formal considerations. I will be teaching a class this summer. It's basically, it has this technological name, and it's technological awareness in cinema or something, but really what it is we'll be talking about special effects. I know over with all these art movies, we've got every kind of art movie there is, and it's not that art movies are against special effects. You look at Lars von Trier with Europa, a movie we've barely scratched on the surface of, but it's like this narrative where we have everything Lars von Trier, but now it's like with these special effects that are costly and over-the-head shots and trains stopping all of a sudden in a freeze frame where a guy can deliver a letter to the other one. We've got very manipulatable landscapes in these big narratives with the special effects. And I'm going to be talking about special effects as an interest of the film story. So actually, I have a few jobs at some effects houses. I've worked with digital domain a little bit, but all they have me do is analyze to see if it looks realistic enough, and I've never thought it didn't look realistic. And by looking realistic, it looks like it does through a naked camera. Well, if special effects are to replace what you would see through a naked camera, then I'm down, I'm interested, because then you're already bringing a point of the story into the making of the film. I know a lot of people criticize movies like Star Wars for having too much special effects, and so if I leer on to film criticism halfway through the class, you'll have to forgive me, but I will be talking about other effects and how they worked in just Hollywood's, but mainly the Hollywood special effect as part of the story. And there's rare few movies that have used special effects as not as part of the stories, which makes me wonder why some effects are overlooked and why effects aren't. And some of them are meant to be overlooked, and we'll take a deeper look into special effects cinema this summer if you take my class. It's going to be on the YouTube Masterclass, and it's still going to be for Harvard, SC, and CalArts. We're not changing anything with the lineup. Throughout, we're doing the teaching for all the schools. Hopefully that divides up the teacher credit that I'm going to need to put into a larger pool of teaching credit For other academic honors I've accepted, I don't know what the final punishment is, but I'll be teaching till the end of time, and that's not a punishment because around here it's never repetitious, so I'm okay with that. It's like a new play every day. It's like I grabbed for the final lecture, and I know you're all getting weepy. I did this at the end of semester 2, and I know half of you are already preparing like emails to me like, what are you going to do with your life in this month off you have before summer school starts? And I know I gave it a month off, and I know that's really sketchy because it's like I'll still be releasing Dungeon Master if I can pick up the pieces from where I went last time. And it was a great Facebook exclusive, I'll say, but I'm not here for myself, my own gratitude. I'm here to teach. And if I can teach you how to do anything, it's to learn from the wise, wiser than me, the critics, David Bordwell and Leonard Maltin and Jay Hoberman with the Village Voice when he worked there. And we've got even Scott Founders from USC. I know he's not really liked by some critics, even SC, but I don't mind him. He does good Harry Potter reviews. What are you going to say? I got to shout out to him somehow. He's from USC. I'm not going to deny that the film school has bad writers. Matt Klickstein, Lorenzo Minetti for teaching me a lot of the Italian film stories and where they came from. And my friends at USC, other people that taught me. I mean, teachers that were in the medium like Stan Brackage, and I did actually preserve some of his films and help him get a budget for a few of his movies because he didn't need much cash, and I gave him some cash, and he made some movies out of it. And I never got to see him, and there were reasons for that. But again, we're not talking about anyone's connections but mine. I had some talks with my critic guild that I had situated amongst references to great critics, and a lot of great critics are philosophers like Edwin McCann and Jason Sheley and Rosh Shemeka. Although Rosh Shemeka, my godfather, would complain to me that only Caravaggio is good, like it says in the Illuminata, because he's a cultural elitist, and that's not fair because he's never really interested in what happens in the day-to-day lives of regular people. He's only really interested in Caravaggio. Now, we moved from the thanks credit. There's a lot more to thank, and who've helped me with my films. And even recently, I had to thank Nine Inch Nails again for being so considerate on lending me of their scores. And I was so thankful to all of those bands, whether they were purporting the message of the devil or not, which we all hope they were, and are going to make sure they were. But I'm not saying that to sell anybody out, because I'm definitely with them on whatever message they want to spread there. The people I pay are my bosses, It's not like I pay just all the money to some fund to get a haircut eventually, which I should do, because then I'd actually be able to afford it. No, I'm kidding. So I'm going to get right into today's lecture. It'll be shortened a little bit. We're only going to briefly rush on the subject, and if I can, I'd like to apologize for not teaching TV criticism this semester. I had hoped to get in one TV narrative, and TV narrative is the grand narrative of the mirror image versus the labyrinthine. The mirror image and the labyrinthine are changed by remote controls, but now editing is such to movies that it travels like a remote control across the image. And that ain't too bad, because that's like people getting to pick what images they want to see for the movie. So why wouldn't they do that? Even if that's a triumph they said about third cinema, that people could reel in their favorite shot of the movie and reel it in the back and have it play again, or another one that they shot of the same ending that they predicted at the same film, If the people could control the film, it'd be a video game, really. Like, video games are moving images, but you actually use a controller to send commands to your actions of where you press the button to the monitor, and at the same time it processes what buttons you're pressing and what effect that point of the game has according to the buttons you're pressing. So when you're in different parts of the game, the buttons may do different things, but the buttons are coordinated to where they have them in the place of the action at the time, and the game is built to handle that while it's going. And if it changes while it's going, it's this new way of compelling the read-only memory to stay in with the random access memory. The read-only memory is like the permanent not moving logarithm. And the random access memory is the randomly jump to it in space and jump to it in time capability of the disk to choose out of a quanta of choices that you'd have, and to program it so you could only make the one choice, make one thing. It's difficult then when you double tap it in different things, the buttons and strategies to the games. This is why it takes a lot of people to make a game. This is why games are expensive. Video games we should have had a class on, because there are really interesting movies made out of video games, like a Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider could even go into the subject we're discussing tonight, and I think we'll segue into that, because we didn't get TV criticism in, and I apologize. And I'm beginning to learn a lot about how the TV criticism is actually a more elite form of criticism. That actually TV, because it's available on so many screens at once, can be thought of as bigger than a movie. Because it's on so many screens at once and people are watching it so many times at once, it's bigger than the internet, because everything selected for the one medium they have is on one channel that's going around to millions of households. I can't imagine anyone discovering that TV has always been pretending to be like this small, anything less but a harbinger of film, and now it is the harbinger of how we can get mediums on in everybody's house at once, like during the quarantine when we were all watching Mulan and it was finally no more theaters and we thought theaters were gone. It was kind of scary, but then we're like, well, this is still a motion picture experience and we can all have it together, but in our house, separate, and that's okay, because that's how some people have handled most of their cinema anyway. I got to admit, from being a critic, I've only seen 1,000 films in the theater, and then the rest were on some form of hard to track down the film video. So hard to track down that film Blood for Dracula. I remember getting on a waiting list after a waiting list, and I wanted to see how they made that movie, and I only remembered the parts of it that I'd barely seen, and I don't think anyone had the rights to it, that it was Criterion at all, and that I'd read about it in some kind of Fangoria magazine or somewhere else. Blood for Dracula was written in some Latino Bible that I found at church or something, I don't know. But I'd heard about that movie, and I tracked it down. Flesh for Frankenstein, I didn't have as much luck with, although I've seen a copy of it. I haven't seen what's on the copy of it, but I've seen a copy of it. I've seen Flesh for Frankenstein actually for sale. So let's get right into it. Oh, and next year when film criticism comes back after the special effect dig of the summer, we're going to come back with film criticism, and then we'll learn more about these studies of film like feminism and the ever-loving study of TV criticism that I've barely gotten into, although How to Watch TV, edited by Ethan Thompson, is a must-read, especially for fans of The Family Guy who want to see how it's written, that they layer their show, so when they have flashbacks and they go right back to the show, it seems like such a sturdy way of telling the whole narrative that they'll clip out at any juncture, no matter how minuscule or big the joke is going to be, which means the minuscule ones get really big too. And something we don't have programmed in TV as necessarily as we should, although there are TV channels more geared towards the feminist model, like Lifetime and Hallmark tend to be more feminine, more for females. Aristocratic females, maybe. I don't know much about the class structure. It seems like everybody in the middle class has everything. I don't, but then more. And then it seems like getting lifted off this earth to remove the curse of my lack of aristocratic needs is slowly waning, when I do realize that even being in a position like this puts me in a position where I can decide things. So I'm deciding that these are more feminist films than are Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz, which are feminist films, but they're in parameters of like, we'll give the movie star everything she wants if she does everything we want her to. Those parameters were falling on Judy Garland and Vivian Leigh. That it was less parameters in this film for, it was less imbued for this film. Michael Palin, Emmerich Pressburger directed. Moira Shearer, I want to say it was Moira Shearer, but it's, they're not listing the actor in this. Weird. Moira Shearer, yeah, I saw it in the dark. It's hard to read these labels in the dark, and I should have these names memorized to the point of winning Jeopardy at it all the time, but I really am not that great at Jeopardy. It's a really hard game, and they don't give you the answers originally. I've actually heard from a friend that played on that game. It's real hard, so I'm not here to do Jeopardy, but I like the idea of Jeopardy. It keeps everybody sharp. But and that's that TV game show theory that would have made great sense, to say we love TV game shows even if they're fake or real, because they had to be real at one point to be fake, right? And this is The Red Shoes, which isn't about real or fake. This is about Ballerina to the End, and that it's a cinema-made movie is really interesting because it's a cinema to the end, Michael Powell movie, and that Moira Shearer dances her way through all three acts, has a dream in the middle that's a ballet sequence, and the ballet dream sequence comes off the movie in 17 minutes of sheer formal considerations that are some of the great all-time wonders of montage, of a music number that takes place in a heightened time and space, a heightened reality, that it's out of time, this music number, like the Broadway melodies of Singing in the Rain. It takes you out of the movie for a second, you go somewhere else, you're at this ballet dream sequence, you know you're going to be there for a while, and then it takes you back in, and you're back at the exact second the ballet went off, only time has elapsed by 5 seconds, and that's how dreams are. You can have this long 2-hour dream and wake up, and it only seems like, well, you look at the clock and only 15 minutes have gone by, but it seems like 2 hours have gone by. You not only get that ballet dream sequence in this, you get obsessed with ballet. Like, it's not just Red Shoes, it's Black Swan. It's the same premise that Aronofsky used in Black Swan to eliminate the competition from ballet and show that it's ballet or ballet do or die or ballet for life. Because when you want to be on the pro market, it's beyond even getting a job in Hollywood. You got to dance your way onto the screen and off without anybody seeing a break in dancing, or they're going to wonder what's wrong, because they want to see you dance. And that is, perfect dancing isn't just a gesture that the audience wants to see it. In ballet, it's a high-class art to be preserved, whether there's an audience or not, but there often is. But there are those that go into ballet just to kind of dive off into ballet school and teach it. And you got to think they've got to be pretty hardcore ballet too, the ballet teachers, and the ballet teachers for this must have been nonstop. That she ballets all the way to her death. At the end of the movie, you kind of see coming that you think that Michael Powell's going to pull his generous hand, which sometimes he does, back and not ruin it as an obsession into love for the art of ballet so much that it gets cinematic when she performs her ballet all the way from here to the end. Now remember, Michael Powell had done Tales of Hoffman, and I want to say Tales of Hoffman was around the same time as this, and actually they were both in Technicolor, and they were examples, again, for all the studios, why Technicolor was a big draw for the cinema. Now, Michael Powell did go back to black and white in The Small Back Room and some other films, but even his Thief of Baghdad, which was years earlier, had already been a Technicolor film that was bringing in more box office to the whole international markets, which were really being gauged, especially around 1948 when World War II had ended and the countries had all reached a conclusion that they didn't want to destroy each other, and now they liked each other's movies, and Great Britain's movies were imported, and Michael Powell was hitting it big with the American audience, and he felt that just to hit really big was The Red Shoes. He'd always plan out these big master performances, you know, a director of spectacles to set all British spectacles. Even like Mike Leigh has done some spectacles and some underspun stories, but never in the vein of Michael Powell, who's dramatized everything from a piece of raindrop on a leaf to a girl who can't get out of her ballet shoes without getting yelled at, and she wouldn't want it any other way. Is it a feminist film? Well, it has the gauntlet like they always run the female actress through to see if she's strong enough. Can't a woman just be strong enough without being pushed through to the brink of death? I mean, I think that's kind of a waste of good talent. Well, let's take our talent and mulch it to the point of near death, and then we'll know she was good enough. Well, good enough for what? She was already good enough. Like, she had to prove it. Like, she did prove it in ballet school with these trainers that she could do it, and she didn't need necessarily to be pushed, though some would argue the push is what makes the drama interesting, that she would
be so obsessed with ballet anyway that with or without a push, she may have gone down the level of ballet forever. When I'm at home doing nothing, it's ballet. When I'm here doing ballet, it's ballet. That she would have probably had this obsession on her own as part and parcel to why she rebels against the commands later to stop. And I think that maybe she had cohorted with these men at first and wanted to see if she could push herself, but then kind of gained this religious level of now she's not going to stop because she doesn't really care if they want her to or not. It's not really a go against them. She's just not going to. And that they go against her is all is futile at that point because she has gone with the dance to the end. And I don't mind that form of fatalism, to be honest, because it's not fatalism. It's go for gold bravura. It's go for what gets you. It's the desire that allures you to the summit of sublime is when you master your art to the point that you can't stop doing it. And believe me, as a governance here, I'm not saying I've mastered any art form, but I have got a master of the art, so it would say that I've mastered that school's art form, which is universal to all American schools. So the school's art form of how to apply or demonstrate or register an artwork in my sense. And I could then call all these artwork commercials for these discs. This is a Criterion disc. Red Shoes, it's a Blu-ray. Everyone should stock up on Criterion Blu-rays. The amount these are worth is later in the future is so worth it as it is. I mean, if you put the amount into what I put into this originally, now it's worth double, if not triple, what I spent. And I could send it back to my company that hired me, Criterion, and say, well, I want to sell you more copies of this and give you this copy back. It hasn't been hardly worked over in maybe a resale project in some weird world of Criterion, and they just be like, oh, that just limits the amount of discs out. Thank you. I mean, and there's reasons why some DVDs are selected for others. One of the main reasons is that it becomes available to someone who's interested in filmmaking, and there's someone interested in just the preservation of filmmaking. And there's a whole department at NYU that teaches you archiving and teaches you how to make that fluid that keeps the films from rotting that are made of whale blubber, the films, the stock, the celluloid that records with its exploding halides onto these walls it's kind of like the halides explode and then it leaves these sort of imprints behind. And that kind of film decays in ways we don't understand because some of it decays faster than the other, depending on usually how wealthy the film stock is. But we're talking more about feminism and how that it's weird that we don't see these kind of films that are more about the female spirit, whether it is enticed by men. And this one somewhat seems that they've defied her and now she's going to defy them. But she gives it till the end and she doesn't make it through the gauntlet. And why she has to be exposed to the gauntlet, I guess it's to make it a dicey melodrama, and that's cool because we have A Star is Born and all those too in American history. But let's take another example of a modern example of where we have some more feminine anguish coming out in movies than we usually do. And that's one of the reasons I think feminists kind of like this movie, or do they not? I'm not sure, because Badlands with Martin Sheen, again, an underrated actor, did all of Apocalypse Now and barely gets any credit today. Come on. And Sissy Spacek. And Sissy Spacek is the female in this. She does the narration. Now, I like how the narration in Days of Heaven by the same director, Terrence Malick, I like how his narration is female in those movies. I like his narration taking over the movies now, or you'll just get a slot of some slow motion happening, stands nearby, and they just rend on this beautiful poetic narration that started with The Thin Red Line. And I love his movies. I don't know what Night of Cups is even about, but I've seen it and I love it. And it's like flying at you, these slow-mo, fast-mo images, and it's all of the city, and it's all of these glittering things and out of focus things and headshots and everything. And then all of a sudden the poetry will just lap over you like this text of dialogue. And in Badlands, it's not even over motivated by this explosion like it is, but it is in a way, because in the Badlands, they're pushed until they snap. Like the movie Taxi Driver, they're pushed until they snap. That it's the lovers on the run theory that we discussed many classes is true, that it's one of the seminal ones of that era. Up next to Wild at Heart would be one that I could think about after that, but True Romance. But Badlands even has the same. True Romance uses some of the music from Badlands and True Romance, and not many people know that. I've probably already brought it up, but the point is there's a female character that has strong risk but she's like, doesn't want to be seen really too much by the camera. It's unknowingly seeing her, we're hoping, except that it's presenting her in her best abilities, as cameras do. You know, that they do present the good qualities of what women are, even if it's defined by the male world of the filmmaking. So far, I don't have a single movie over here that's directed by a woman in this feminist complete stack. I mean, and then I've got the Hurt Locker last in here somewhere, and it's a female-directed movie, but it's a World War movie about bombs in Iraq, and it makes Iraq seem really bleak. And then, you know, that we all know that story, that the females of our era are brilliant filmmakers and don't get enough awards, and that females throughout the eras have been somewhat suppressed since the 1920s, when Norma Talmadge and all these other directors, like from the early silent era, even down to Alice Guy of the French era, that had created a version of color and sound in her laboratory and always was given it credit, or Mary Ellen Butte, who created the TV wave. And she didn't create the TV, but she created the TV wave, or the wave that goes between tube to tube. And I think Mary Ellen Butte gets read out of that whole invention of the TV more than she needs to. And Badlands is kind of a woman's film because it kind of has this intense novel writing of what a woman would see, and that she is kind of this strange femme fatale of like, but still recoiled. And that she does want to see some damage done to the people that try to hurt her and her husband, and that they got into it unexpectedly, as very Sugarland Express, which would come after Badlands and everything. But with its score, its narrative, and its narration belonging to the female, we can see why this has made strides, even in a film that the female has to go through less of a gauntlet for, because her man has a big war fence attached to anyone that tries to mess with her. And it's a beautiful thing for Sissy Spacek then to have done Carrie, for instance, and kind of gone into the female part. And then what happens if it's over excessive? But in Badlands, she never has to face a consequence for over excess. And I'm telling you, from the female point of view, is already a directive from the feminist to check out the film and see if it's okay. That I'll never understand certain things about feminism is obvious, because I decided to stay a man, and that's my way to do. That's my failure in life. I don't know if I'll ever be able to handle what a woman can handle. I wouldn't be able to handle a movie like one of these if they asked me to make it. I'd have begged for the nurse at that point. And then Belle de Jour, here's another one. And all of these are about women going to success. You know, the outlaw, the ballet dancer, extremely dancing to success, and that they're really big parts and showy parts for these females. And Belle de Jour, here we've got this, it's a Spanish director with some French companies, and Belle de Jour is probably a French title, but it could be Spanish, considering it says in French with English subtitles. Am I about to reveal that Luis Buñuel started in Spain, went to Mexico, and did officially go to France? And if this is a French film, all in French, by Luis Buñuel, did that mean that it was the only country he could direct in at the time that would take him? And we saw what he did with Los Olvidados, how he amazingly solved the problem of world crisis by showing us the biggest world crisis is the tragedy in our lives around us and in our own lives, and how we can only relate to those living on the street of Mexico, and how they're problems are even worse in ways than any ones we realize, but they still function like regular human people. And to say that's a really racist thing, I mean, it makes it sound like I'm condescending, but I'm only telling that to people that don't realize that it's hard growing up as a little kid on the Mexican street, and it's much harder for anyone like Louis Buñuel to get the word out. So don't get me for him not being subversive and not getting kicked out for a reason, because he's playing it like it is. He's showing the story of kids in trouble like it is, and this was the story of a woman who may or may not be troubled because she might already like going to excess. As a prostitute, she likes to have a lot of success. But as a prostitute, she likes going to excess. And now we've got this problem with S&M. It's like, what degree of S&M do we allow? If something causes a person pain and they want it to, is it a disorder of the brain? And that she's the beauty of the day makes it look like each day she's going to change in her own beauty and be like this calendar model for each day of the week. And that she changes her beauty in this film throughout each day of the week makes you wonder if she isn't beauty of the day, and that isn't the way she lives her life. But this is not the point of personas in foreign films, like hoping that they're packaged as these mechanical objects like all men like to have them. That the S&M kind of gets risky, because then it's like, well, if she's losing her mind and using it, then that could reflect on my mind and why I'm seeing like us all in a Parisian tale of like something taken from Canterbury Tales that was distilled to down in Lovers in the Park or something, you know? And that could be Buñuel's own way of deconstructing the whole narrative myth, pulling it all apart and saying, this is how we want to see the prostitute, as a complete objective desire we reach for because we're motivated by the sublime, right? We know that now in this class. We're motivated by the sublime and bliss. That's what motivates our desire. And that's our will to act to get our motives of bliss handled. That's how desire acts to function along the path of the sublime. And that we get everything revealed here is nauseating as a man, because you're like, it's too much of what a man wants. You got to turn this off for me. It's like the chick bowing down before all your commands, the chick doing everything you're telling her as a lady, the chick actually thinking that you're saying something true, and you say, and your gender can do this too, which really sounds like somebody needs to be punched in the face if they're saying that. Now, I say that sometimes, not because I disbelieve in my student audience. It's more like, well, to get back at those listening in that are saying, well, so they do make movies in Mexico. Wow. And it's like, well, all of our greatest filmmakers right now, most of them are from Mexico. So I don't know who has problems with the Mexican government. I'm writing a book on it now called Totally Amazing, the Mexican Army. You know, who cares? I love it. But we're having the Spanish army, so I better not conduct any Mexican errors to them, because they'll be on them like South Madrid on pie. Now, if I don't get a few more jokes in like that, then I'm not taking myself too seriously, as criticism tends to do when it comes to these matters. Now, the reason I don't is because I've learned that one part of multiculturalism is the imbalance of multiculturalism across the board. You could have someone as a total feminist not caring much about the study for race, but most good multiculturalists will allow for any hidden voice rather than the hidden voice only promontory of the multicultural unit on this system, which is what I was going to imbibe you about TV, is basically still filled with certain stereotypes that are used as iconography. Now that the icons on a computer aren't really as racist, it's because they're dots and pixels made to look like a picture. And I think if someone drew me one of the Alamo, it would give me instinct feeling, whether it was the John Wayne version or the Ron Howard version, and how I'd way rather go see the Ron Howard version, because at least then Billy Bob Thornton gets to use the shotgun, and we've all wanted to see special effects like that, you know. But in Belle de Jour, you're picking a film that's like over-masculinizing the ideal of what a woman would be captive in a movie, as though she would do anything the man wants, and that she is doing what the man wants. It's supposed to be one of those guilt spree reverse things like you have with Sharon Stone in the movie Basic Instinct, where she flashes the audience, and the guy that plays Newman, can't think of his name, is looking at her, and we all feel like as guilty as him. if we leaned in, and if we leaned in, then we're already stupid because the movie leans in, and the movie doesn't lean in when we want it to, and it makes us all lean in, and then we're all a bunch of assholes because we did it, and that's what the director wanted us to feel in Basic Instinct, really. I mean, it seems like it was a satire. The Showgirls movie seemed like it was a satire. I'll take Paul Verhoeven as a satirist. I mean, even, you got to say Starship Troopers, satire. I mean, then it's on the realm of extreme satire where it's comedy almost, slapstick almost. Like, but believe me to say that, again, the tricks of her expression of sexuality beyond desire are more than satire. They're subversive to the point that we don't want her to be that endangering to herself anymore. And we wondered if she endangered herself, like that's something to be wondering about, like we should shelter her from endangerment all of a sudden. That Buñuel was coming down with her from a Simon of the Desert guilt spree and saying, now you should be the one to feel guilty to his actress. And it's Catherine Deneuve, by the way, and she still looks great today. And I'd say Catherine Deneuve was so amazing in that performance that it was like the new Brigitte Bardot idea, that like you could cast her as the lead in all these perfect films before her, and that she got lead after lead, and she was already in several leads before Belle de Jour, and that she took the part was perfect for those seamy directors who wanted her to blow up like Marlene Dietrich on screen, and she was using that to kind of cajole this kind of over-masculinized society that just wants to whip their women into what they want. So they all get to whip her in the film, and these guys that are looking upon her are like these drovey aristocrat guys that are going to take care of her, but also she's so beautiful that they just want to up and own her and eat her. And if I could even tell you the owner and eater theory, I mean, the owner and eater theory of it never wins, you know. Even in a movie, it never wins. I mean, the owner and eater theory is like, she's too beautiful for me, but I will eat her so no one else gets her. And I will eat her, like, even though I'm not a cannibal and it's not a religious interest. And if you're not a cannibal and it's not a religious interest, then it's probably not a good idea to even threaten to eat someone. So don't say you're going to eat a woman. That these guys and her were eating her to pieces was because they only wanted her one way, and she only revealed that she'd only go that way. And it drives them to the temptation to that. Then she's dying multiple times. Makes me wonder what is a dream and what isn't. But then in Buñuel, you're kind of dreaming while you're not. You're having the dream while reality's happening. So you're like sleepwalking from room to room to room, but you still pick up some of what's going on in reality. And that's how surrealism is anyway. As a dream in another world, and we go to sleep, we take a dream, and then we kind of see things that are real. It kind of seems like we're in our same room, but enough things are different about the room, you know. Last one on the edge of feminism. We're on the edge of feminism, and I know these aren't really the most thought of films when it comes to feminism. Badlands, Red Shoes, and Belle de Jour, but that's because there aren't many films especially constructed by men that weren't megalomaniacs with their own auteur theory that they'd run away with Truffaut's theory until they get to control the movie. Is good where the actress to these movies controlled the movie a little bit. I'm not really sure, but that the actors had a lot of control in these movies, I'm seeing not quite to the level of what we discussed last semester, which A Woman Under the Influence was the one we dredged up on the feministic beauty. And we've talked a little bit about that film in semester 2, and we'll talk about it in semester 3, which will be film criticism again for another year before I have to change that class's topic that I'll be doing the following summer too. I'm just announcing that I'm doing this for a long time. I hope to do it forever. Like, I haven't done anything to make anyone angry or take any place I wasn't supposed to, or take any rhyme or reason to it I was supposed to. And I think we've had a learning curve here. I think we've even explored how semester 1 got us all ready to write about film and films that we love and defending the film that we love. And this, of course, comes into cinema pure, which is what are the things that make cinema purely cinema, and what are the things that make pure cinema cinema, and what is pure cinema. But if you, and I've decided to make it easier. If you'd answer what cinema pure is, I'll give it to you. If you answer it what critics mean by when they say pure cinema, I'll give it to you. And if you get both right, and make a couple of pages out of each of it, maybe 3 pages out of each type of purity there is of cinema. And there's either cinema pur or pure cinema, and they're very similar. And I'll give you a hint. One works from the inside out, and one works from the outside in. That's all I can tell you. One is a purity of the way the images are formed, that they can only be edited to. The music and all the scenography and the mise-en-scène and the montage are all matched up, and that can be a form of cinema in its purity, like only doing what cinema can only do, and that's stream of edited pictures that are moving. But then there's pure cinema, which is where the avant-gardists were taking to strain out everything from the image and make it so impressionistic that a blank screen was actually the movie of avant-garde times, of being how long can you stare at the screen movies without them ever changing, being the impressionist pure cinema that only cinema can do. But a magic lantern you can stare at a screen pretty long, but it just represents a lot smaller, because usually it's coming from far away when it's shown into a painting. And then we're going to my last feminist work, and this is the most written about film of all time. And we're going to try and start off here next semester, but no promises, because I didn't get the TV criticism in, which, by the way, of all the criticism against TV, Alfred Hitchcock, who was on TV regularly with the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, was showing how movies could actually be more intense and more pure in a way, and more spinal revenge and more funny and more intact if they tried to do things that were harder to do, like show an aesthetic serial killer, like a serial killer done aesthetically, could really push the bounds of cinema. And it's kind of weird, because Michael Powell, who we were talking about, had a similar idea, and both of them were based on voyeurism. Like something, women being looked at in the shower about to be stabbed, and peeping Tom is like you're staring at the girl you're about to stab with the telescope. It's a really weird way of having Rear Window become like 3 different films. But Peeping Tom's a real movie, and it's real scary, and it's kind of aestheticized more than Psycho, but the Psycho's almost shot like a docudrama, except the camera goes and looks at objects that aren't moving, like, what are they? Like, objects that are just sitting there, like money and a newspaper, and the camera will draw itself towards these inanimate objects, that they're animate only with the animation of the owner of a paper, because the paper will just sit there due to gravity. It doesn't have a heartbeat in it, although you can get pictures in it so much that they jump when they're uncrinkling. I don't know. But that she's got a paper and the money in a briefcase, and she's going to return the money in Psycho. And Alfred Hitchcock, here we go again. He takes pressure off of his own Lady Vanish's mind and wants to see what another one through a female mind like Rebecca or Marnie fit in the category of, and instead makes Psycho, where it's totally the trickery of cinema that's used here, almost in a purely cinematic way. Because if you have the cinema trick of all time, that you line up a star as someone who's in the main plot of the film, and then halfway through the film she runs into you-know-who, and you know what happens to her. And the aestheticized violence changes the plot to now we got to find the serial killer. So now it's a horror film again. And it always was, but you had to wait until you went from the domestic melodrama of her and her lover needing more money, and she steals money, and then she goes to return it. And then there's a surprise encounter, the cold shower, and Hitchcock makes this scene in like 25 days, but that he annihilates the female in a way that year was also done by Michelangelo Antonioni in La Ventura. Is La Ventura, she just stops showing up in the frame, eventually gets questioned about, and as she eventually gets questioned about, she gets lost in the narrative off screen. That in Psycho, Janet Leigh is taken off screen, but apparently how? But I can't spoil the ending, or Hitchcock will rise from the grave. Yeah, Hitchcock may rise from the grave, but I can't spoil the ending anyway, because I don't remember how it ends. Does it end where they catch the serial killer in a Hitchcock film, and the serial killer doesn't get the death penalty in this one? And does he break out? I mean, he seems about nifty of getting in and out of places. It does kind of seem it sets it up for like a sequel, that he's already more insane than any of the police guards that are trying to dredge out what even a transvestite is, which is so offensive because Hitchcock goes in and makes them all sound like primitive scholars of the subject that seem like they even have a notion of what it means. And in the 60s, they were primitive scholars of the subject and barely had a notion of what it means. So you see that these advanced skills of the director are already ahead of the time on what they're calling a movie and what they're calling not a movie is, and that it's the most written about movie of all time. And sometimes for feminism, well, you have the voyeuristic quality, that the voyeuristic stares at the image that's not dangerous when the woman is made objectified. But something about a woman can always seem dangerous by the candid use of the camera, especially in documentary lane, where it seems like the woman would be luring you in to destroy you, and that she destroys us only through her own destruction is because we're lured into her shower, and the next thing you know, because our eyes are following her into the shower, which we're liking as masculine characters somehow in this narrative, we're like, yeah, she's been a sex ploy in this movie already once at the beginning, this is going to be good, shower scene, and then we all get our minds wrecked by whatever happens in there that I can't describe, took 24 days to film. It absolutely boggles my mind how you could spend so much time on a violent scene and recommend that that's not what it's criticizing, is the violence. I mean, I don't know if it's criticizing violence or not, but the violence is recommended in an aesthetic scene, and usually when a director usually uses aesthetics for violence, it's usually to show it up and sell some tickets, but that's also the message of, we know we're aestheticizing it, and yet we're showing it up anyway. But if that's showing off to a director, that's like showing off with a guitarist. He hits a good lick and he suddenly is showing off? Or is it if he purposely lays the wick down and just constantly does the same wick because that's all he's companioning for, and then gets still called to show off? It can be a little tricky in the artistic medium, because as directors going to make big bank that are known by in their name, they're always going to show off a bit. That stylizing aesthetics is really a form of showing off among directors, not an insult to them, but it's kind of like where special effects are used to aestheticize the narrative and be these like underscore. Speaking of underscore, like the underscore is the elaborate music time spent to a popular, usually classic film, and the undercurrent narrative of the film is flowing with this music that matches it. And we have that in Psycho with Bernard Herrmann. We have the titles slicing each other up. We have the low-budget nature of the movie already pummeling us with the titles, that North by Northwest was a high-rise experiment, and that everything was this expensive travels through America, and now Psycho is a pretty brief, fragile journey with the budget of the film and the cost of how much she stole. When she goes to give it back, maybe they got their budget of the film back because she's in one of those scandals now where it looks like she's gone. And then she's back in the Manchurian Candidate anyway, years later, but she wasn't dead from Psycho. Why aestheticize violence otherwise? Politics, that it's on women, as she pulled us into the shot, and she's more dangerous than we think, because she magnates towards serial killers. Serial killers are attracted to her, so her gaze is unfriendly and unbearing to have, because it's been only through rare incidents has she showed herself honest at all, and now we think that we can lock gaze with her because she's not a femme fatale. She's going back to give the money that she absolutely would have died without, so she's going back to die. And then if she goes back to die and be humiliated by prison, it may have been worse than getting slashed like a rookie. But I didn't just say that, because if I give any evidence of this way, I'll never be able to watch it again, which means I'll never be able to watch it again, because I gave away the ending, which is where they kind of catch the serial killer. They don't find the money. Nobody tells them where it is, which the camera was riding along with, getting thrown in the back of the car. They show Norman Bates covering up the evidence of the tragic murder, and there's a couple other kills and projected kills, and even a ghost in some lawn cemetery that rose up and killed them all. And there's a stuffed version of his mother that's been taxonomist? I forget what that is. Taxologist, which puts all those mummied bodies together. And I had that one wrong. But there's taxidermy. Yeah, they taxidermy the mom because he's into taxidermy of birds. So we get all these horrible serial killers thing presented to us on the slide, totally at this haunted house where everything goes rigidly crazy. The camera doesn't even follow him up the stairs. Knives are coming out of females. We don't know who's screaming what. And if he's talking to himself, then he's doing a pretty good job because he's answering himself. Anyways, all these qualities we see in him, we still can't elect him to be the man that pulled the double stunt round knifing fest that we saw earlier, because if he was, he'd have to be actually halfway stealthy and smart, which he's totally not, because he's now a clumsy version of himself, covering it up for his mother, who he transformed into. And that there's a bunch of sequels. Let me remind you that the whole reason that most monster movies have females in it is not really because they get scared more. Is not really because they're easier targets, although I would say that running through the gauntlet experience usually happens in these horror films like Alien, or the female is tortured the most out of the cast, but to prove herself, like she has to do double time. But I'm telling you, in Psycho, we're really feeling kind of more like an everyday woman all of a sudden, even though she's fantastic looking and a movie star good looking, she's still starting to play this part of a more human being rather than these even though Sissy Spacek's really humanist in her serial killer, but that's a little extreme. And then in Red Shoes, it's extreme with ballet, it's crazy. And in Belle de Jour, she's just an extreme beauty, just doing it for men and prostitution and money and all these things she's caught up to that are excessive, so why not give them what they want until they die? The Psycho's a regular down home every day, like typing secretary that wants to be with a good-looking man from a more powerful job, but he is relying on this money that's going to save them both in this lawsuit they have from their other significant others who still think they can split them up. And that's a whole subplot never seen, but that she's an everyday woman, and then suddenly gets this breakout of money. It's like, oh, we're playing it this way that she could actually be a hero to all of us, like a Thelma and Louise. And I bet the audience of the 60s going, yeah, she's going to be punished for that, but we're all, oh, she'll escape. So he read the future and past audiences, Hitchcock did. Says some will think she's going to get punished, some will think she's not. It's not a punishment to run across a serial man who's going to serial waste you. No, that's not what he said, but he's not going to waste any cereal. Yeah. That reminds me, Psycho has influenced as many movies as the papers have been written about it. The papers that have been written about it always compared to other movies. I'm taking Peeping Tom for my comparison, but that's not fair because they both came out at the same time and were about the same thing. But remember the feminist theory that says Vertigo is all about objectivizing our sight to behold. Whereas Psycho, by the time we objectify our sight to behold, and she's getting real interesting, she's coming down the lane with $40,000, she's getting away from everybody. And then if I tell you what happens, Hitchcock himself will come out of a grave behind me, and it will be much more aestheticized than I've ever been able to pull off as a small-time director and a small-time writer. It'll basically, like, I've may aestheticized the fall of China, like, more than the robot Holocaust, and now I think I need to go back and teach the animatrix again, you know. But we did pretty good. We marked all standards. I mean, we got to see some film semiotics, like syntax, like the grand Syntagmatique by Christian Metz. We got to detail how that can list how things are scenes and shots and sequences next to each other and how they play out. Typically, it's an ordinary sequence that has uses of the elliptic, dramatic, and bracket syntagmas. We can see how the different syntagmas play through different mediums to show us how arrangements of editing, decoupage, are shifted upon, and how to read the image if it's shifted upon. Like if it's a parallel narrative, it's two stories going on at the same time, being clipped back and forth, although we've seen some parallel narratives who aren't at the exact same time in movies like Mulholland Drive and Celine and Julie Got Boating, where the timing gets thrown off and it's intentionally part of the movie. In both cases, they're talking about the making of movies too, and how there's that whole day for night factor, and you can film a day scene for night. So we've learned some syntax. So we're pretty good. That'll get us ready for graduate school where things get really hard. And I know this can be taught for the graduate student. I do expect this final to be a little harder for the graduate student, that they would have to answer both what cinema pure is and both what a critic means when they say pure cinema, because I think those are important distinguishes we can all make. It's an easier paper than you think. Use the word decoupage. Decoupage means that all the images are grappled together in one sense, that they all form one big unit. And when you're editing, you get the decoupage all the way from the beginning to the middle to the end all the way, and it goes in a line, and that it's linear. Though it can be nonlinear, it's still a linear medium. I mean, to say it wasn't a linear medium would be like we could rewind and pause in the middle of the movie while we're watching it in the theater. But linear has taken a different meaning on the home video because there's a need for pausing. And there's, somebody drops a can of soup in the house, you pause it, you go pick it up, and then you get the movie going again. But people think that that's like a new phenomenon, like from VHS wasn't the same way, only that we had to rewind certain parts of movies over and over to really see who Kaiser Soze was in the most rewind stripped movie of any video store. And this was only 30 years ago or something, and that was The Usual Suspects on VHS, and that everything was available on VHS is only part of the reason I'm looking at these like they're a gold mine. And that Psycho is shot less for Northern by Northwest is the total reason that it's been written about the most. How you can go from a big budget to a little budget is not something anybody tries to do usually. That it can be done wasn't just to show that Alfred Hitchcock had the edge on cinema, he had the edge on TV, because he was going to show how cinema could show things, again, aesthetic violence, that TV cannot, being distributed to so many people. It has to be lowest common denominator, down to what everyone in the world can see, versus the movie, what he was restricting people that had given away the ending not to see. Alfred Hitchcock being less controversial in his life than his films were controversial. We got to give him that, because everybody's got to live with a controversial bio. And all we know from Hitchcock's bad side is that he hit on some of the actresses in his films. I mean, that's not the heck with it, or what they'd have you go through in Sweden to be an actress in their movie. Not that they didn't want to. I'm not saying there was any non-compromise, because we all know that non-compromise is the thing we're thinking about in what makes sex a problem in movies anyway, is when one of the characters or actors wouldn't want to be compromised, and still are, that sometimes it's a struggle for power play. I'll let go for now, although I think it's very anti-feminist for me to stand up as a scene's meant to deconstruct power play, but then taken as to meaning that that's the power play that everyone should use. I don't think that was what the directors were going for when they aestheticized the killing and the compromisation of a woman. However, again, in Belle de Jour, this whole thing, and this is after Psycho, Belle de Jour didn't show these in orders, Badlands even further. But in Belle de Jour, she uses her gaze as a death trap, end him in, to get him locked into their tractor beams, get him there, and then totally humiliate them by having them put pie on each other's ass and eat it off. And I'm not saying that's not funny, because that could be a really good way to trick someone really masculine and to think he's having a fantasy about you. But that she gets killed in all those dreams proves their dreams, because it wouldn't be the 9 lives of Captain Deneuve, who is still alive or may have just barely passed. I don't have the record on that. I don't keep a whole tray of tickets on it. I did hear that David Bowie passed, yes, and that was a big one to look at. But I'm not sitting here going, well, whose ticket should I look at? I watch those things that the TCM creates, TCM Remembers, and you can see all the actors that died this year, and you can get really intense with those. And those music schemes they have with all these great bands, those are beautiful montages from the heart, soul of these actors and actresses and directors that have been the gods of Hollywood for all this time, and that the gods are coming to the end of it all. And cinema, will it survive? And cinema has survived as a study, but will cinema survive? Thus it will as an art form, but can it survive as a medium? And it's up to film criticism like us to keep it alive for while we can, because if we keep it alive and on paper and important to write about, then we're all going to go back to our favorite scene and rebel without a cause and wonder how we ourselves prevented James Dean from falling over the cliff so that he could make the alternative ending of Giant, or whatever it was, dream cast that we've all had, that Hollywood set us up to have for that. And you can even see it extrapolated and exaggerated in Kenneth Anger's Hollywood Babylon 2. But Kenneth Anger, with his most exquisite language, describes very evocative themes in his work, and all these things that happen with Dahlia, the Black Dahlia, being this child given up for deceased when she died mysteriously, and she was primed to be an artist, and there was no connection with other things that they didn't make movies about in Hollywood at the time. But Hitchcock instead shows a fair moral medium to direct the essence of man's insanity and evanishment into the abyss and the darkness and things worse than the darkness and things worse than the devil, that involve the story of who this movie Psycho was really about and how he had been a cannibal Satanist. Hitchcock wasn't really trying to let all that out to be excitement, but he kind of did in a way, because he makes you really get into the mind of a serial killer, and that he doesn't do anything controversial in his life proves that he put it all into the movie. Now, I'm not saying that other directors have to be against themselves when they're going into movie making, but Hitchcock set the groundwork for the Christopher Nolans of today. I mean, I know that one director that's like Hitchcock a lot is David Cronenberg, and I shudder in David Cronenberg's wake. I mean, David Cronenberg is so big that even the big screen can't hold how big his images are. His images are like oil paintings. And that he does these movies that are set in different dramas, or set in today's narrative with these vast budgets, and that he's as calm as Hitchcock on a set of silence until the noise gets added to it. Makes me wonder how they got through Naked Lunch without hearing alien voices during the whole thing. And that Naked Lunch would be a feminist film, but all the females are aliens. I'm not going to get into for now, because I had to leave with a joke, because I'm making you all cry. We went over time. We have to wait until April's over to get more Hitchcock impressions, which will be per view. Those that can remember, there still needs to be TV criticism. And really, do yourself a favor and learn TV criticism. Buy How to Watch TV. Buy a guide to watching about film, and you'll see how to write about TV. That TV writing is the extreme top of a lot of these mythologies of writing in general, and I think it's because the TV is so endurable, and that because everybody saw what was on it. And on the internet, we somehow get these ideal audiences that watch these, but then we think of the whole region that would have seen them if they were on TV. And I know we've got some TV sensibilities here, but we're in a small box with a lot of big boxes in our hands, and we're going through movies like movie history, movie trivia, reason movies are made, not just in terms, but aesthetic structures, and montage, and mise-en-scène. Which mise-en-scène, again, is everything in the frame, including what can be perceived as the frame around it. And montage is where one shot meets an end of itself and reaches another shot. So it's editing and production design are so focused on production design being mise-en-scène and montage for editing. And I don't really want to discuss why montage isn't as popular of a subject right now, but it is mathematically between any nation. And to think that anyone had the rhythm down as much as D.W. Griffith had is a bad idea, because actually most of the films that came in subsequent eras that narrowed with montage were already trying to figure out how he made Intolerance work. And I could discuss a whole class on how Intolerance was made work. I think I already did. But Intolerance was basically made full of the torpedoes ahead as a plan Griffith had to make, and especially became his big wipeout disaster, apologizing for Birth of a Nation. Because why? Because in this one, he's setting free the slaves. In Babylonian captivity, he's setting free the slaves in the Revolution, the French War with the Valentine and the Queen, is all kind of Alice in Wonderland looking, but it's still to set the slaves free of the French Revolution. Jesus died setting free the slaves. I know none of us believe that, right? But even did in Griffith, and he puts it up there just making us all feel guiltier that, Jesus died for the slave, and so now we've all got to feel bad. And then we all feel like slaves to the end because a regular commoner from our period that would seem to be even mildly aristocratic in an industrial society full of webs of the poor and rich can't afford to take care of his wife who's giving birth to a baby, and since she's alone and he can't take care of her and been arrested for can't taking care of her, she can't take care of her kid at home according to the next arresters. And now before they all go down on death penalty without a food and the baby's taken away and everything else, they have a race to the end of the train tracks to see if they can abominate on slavery in the industrial era, bro. Which, if you think Big Brother's still not watching you, you didn't get the terminal of the intolerance, saying that that's intolerance modern day, that we're still fighting, and now all we have is glad we have a governor's assistant that can drive fast enough to outrun a train 3 times, outrun 3 trains, to get to the barracks, to get to the hangman's noose, to press the button, to stop him from being hanged. It's been another semester of Masterclass. I'll see you back next year, well, next fall, or summer if you come check out my special effects class. Yeah, it'll be mostly us figuring that out as we go, what any of those mean, because otherwise we've been doing them injustice. All right, we'll talk later. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Sheedy.